It is now time for the Right to Vote show featuring Congressman Ronnie Shows.
Hello, everyone. This is Ronnie Shows on your Right to Vote program on October the 6th, 2022. And our guest is Anna Wolfe, who's no stranger to our station. She's a reporter for the Mississippi Today, and she's the only reporter in the state that actually broke this story. And if it hadn't been for Anna Wolfe, we might never have heard about it. So, Anna, we'll start with you in just a minute. Let me get through with some of my introductions. Of course, you can go on Facebook, WJMG 921 FM Southeast Mississippi. We're going to have the call-in line busy, but you can text at 601-214-7143 if you'd like to ask a question. And, of course, it's a WJMG 92.1 FM and WGDQ 93.1 FM. Let's not to forget, we still have an issue with social distance, the COVID and all the variances, so be careful. You have a crowded place, wear a mask, and let's pray for our country and president. We always dedicate the program to Vernon Floyd, the owner and founder and operator, and of course the new owner and operator, CJ Lee, and a friend of mine, and helps contribute and helps me find guests, Sandra Jordan. Anna, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Sound like we're good to go, huh?
Yeah. How are you doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing good. Just proud of you and what you've been doing to let Mississippians know what's going on in our state government. And like I've always, it's, I tell you, I can't tell you how many people are bragging on you that listen to our show. They're so thankful that we've still got a news agency that's not owned by big corporations, but nonprofit. Let's not forget, Mississippi Today is a nonprofit. So all you got to do is Google Mississippi Today and it'll pop up, and you let them know you want it. It doesn't cost you anything, but they would like a donation. It's like you're going to church. They don't charge to go to church, but they sure need the donations. Well, this nonprofit needs help, but they're doing very well. And I hear you, the Mississippi Today has a lot of different contributors, even some Republicans and Democrats across, who contribute because they want fair and balanced and really balanced news. So that's great. And we appreciate what you're doing, and Margaret and all the other crews there and all the other reporters. I know there's other reporters there too. But let's get back to what we really want to talk about, what most people want to know. What do you think is the next phase of the fraud case, and what's going to happen? If you have any new news or anything like that you might would share with us today that you have.
Yeah, so I think the latest sort of news item on this story is that Brett Favre has hired this attorney, a former attorney of Donald Trump, Eric Hirschman, who has said that he's gone through lots of documents and that he's convinced that Brett Favre did nothing wrong within this welfare scandal. I think that this shows that Brett Favre is taking this allegation a little more seriously now, especially with all the national attention that the story has gotten. There's two kind of parallel court processes happening here. There's the civil suit that the state brought in May against 38 people or individuals who received welfare money improperly, and that includes Brett Favre. And then there's a separate criminal investigation that's sort of being undertaken by both the state and the feds following the auditor's office, their original investigation back in 2020. John Davis, the former welfare director, as we talked about last time, has just here recently pleaded guilty to federal charges and has agreed to aid the prosecution. And they've said that they are moving up the ladder, which means that they've got their sights set on higher level officials. Up the ladder from John Davis is obviously former Governor Phil Bryant.
Right. Well, what these departments try to do is, this couldn't happen if the elected officials didn't allow it to happen. Now, in good conscience, you can't say that people didn't probably have an idea they shouldn't be getting it, but it wouldn't have happened if Bryant and the governor and Reeves and all these guys hadn't let it happen. So they're going to go up to food chain, just like they did with highway commissioners, public service commissioners. You start with the contractors. You know they're getting money from kickbacks to the commissioner at that time, and they just went to them and said, "We'll make you a deal. You either go to jail, or you're going to tell us how it works and how'd you get your money, the kickbacks." And so and that's basically the way it's going to work here, I believe. So I just wonder who else is going to cut a plea deal to get this off their back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we're waiting to see what kind of testimony these folks have too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of this focus has been on what text messages and, documented communication exists, especially within the civil suit over a subpoena that Nancy New, the nonprofit founder, has issued against the former governor, Phil Bryant. But, there's also just testimony. So at some point, if it gets to that point, they could provide an affidavit or get up on the stand and really tell what happened and who all was involved.
Well, I think that's the reason a lot of these sentences had been set, because the government's going to see what kind of testimony they get out of them. If it's what they told them they were going to tell, then they'll be okay. But if it's not, they may find that the deal's gone, and so they got to be really. But what upsets me, Nancy New's been in this business a long time. And Davis has been in this business a long. They knew it was wrong, and they still went after the money. And so it's makes you kind of pit in your stomach that they're gonna give information, but they're going to have to live with this for the rest of their life. And,
yeah, I think there's a pretty big delineation here, though, between like legalities and moralities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are things that you and I would say are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Using money that really is allocated to solve poverty and using it in ways that don't accomplish that goal. It's perfectly legal to do that. It's perfectly legal to divert money away from needy families and to projects that may or may not have any efficacy in drawing people out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly legal, but whether it's right or wrong, I think readers can decide for themselves.
I think a lot of people have decided. If it's true, I don't think history's going to show very well. We used to have a saying in the legislature, "Oh, don't make the road." You got your pictures on the wall in the House and Senate, Mississippi. And they say that's a good way to get your picture taken off the wall, So.
Yeah, but I think that we do as a society convince ourselves that if something is legal, then it's okay. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Legal loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what this story is about to some degree, is that they thought that they could legally get away with doing these maneuvers because the program had been had so little accountability and sort of opened up the possibilities of doing that. And so, we convince ourselves, I think, that if something is legal, then it's okay. And
mm-hmm.
that's how some of this stuff happened.
Well, that's what they did with the volleyball court. They changed, what they say, it was going to be a rec center for the poor or underserved. Is that
right.
what they said they were going to do?
Yeah. And they were calling it a wellness center, which I think just goes to show how much they knew that they had to change the purpose from just being a volleyball stadium in order to use the money the way that they did. And so I think that I think really speaks volumes in terms of what they knew that they were doing.
Well, didn't you say you had an email where Favre said this is not going to get in the media?
Yeah, he texted. So Nancy New was the nonprofit founder who had the nonprofit through which a lot of the misspent money was spent. So instead of the Department of Human Services paying USM directly for construction of the volleyball stadium, the money went through the nonprofit, and then the nonprofit subgranted with the athletic foundation, who had subleased with the university. So you can kind of see the different machinations of this thing. But she had been communicating with Favre about potentially using this grant money for this project, and Favre, at one point, Favre had run into issues with USM being nervous about taking this money. So USM was apprehensive about taking a grant this big for something like construction of a volleyball stadium, which construction is prohibited
Brick and mortar are prohibited. That's exactly right.
Right. And FAR have even used the term brick and mortar in text messages with the nonprofit founders, saying if you can't, spend it on brick and mortar, or if DHS can't spend it on brick and mortar, maybe we can pass it through someone else and then they can spend it on brick and mortar. And he used the term brick and mortar, which is not like, that's exactly the term that appears in the TANF regs. So I feel like that gives some indication too.
But when you go for grants and stuff like that, a few I've dealt with when I was in office, it says no brick and mortar. It can be used for brick and mortars. It's got to be used for the purpose of the people. And
right.
And they can put equipment in it, and they could do that, but it's building the building's just not allowed. But I guess if you circumvent enough ways, you can make it seem like you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Art, as we progress, what's the chain of events you think is going to be happening now in the next 2 months? Or do you think when's this thing going to go to trial, you think?
Well, there's no trials for right now.
Okay.
Everyone has pretty much pled guilty. There's one person who hasn't pled guilty yet, but he's a very low-level person in the scandal, and so we don't expect him to go to trial. I think his charges are just being continued until, there's a resolution to this thing. But there's no one has been charged who is awaiting trial. As far as the criminal, now the civil case, I don't think we're going to see any movement on really soon in terms of like actual court proceedings. There haven't been any depositions scheduled. There were depositions scheduled that were supposed to be taking place last month and right now, but they were set by the former attorney on the case, Brad Pygott, who, as listeners know, was fired back in July. So I don't know. Depositions haven't been set. There's several motions and different things that the court is being asked to consider that will come up in a hearing probably not until early next year, maybe January, February. And that includes this court battle over whether Phil Bryant will have to comply with a subpoena that Nancy New has brought against him.
I hope he does.
Sorry?
I hope he does.
Well, I think they both are coming at it with strong arguments about, Nancy New's attorney is saying that the text messages will be crucial to her defense because her defense has to do with Phil Bryant, in some cases, having directed her to make the purchases that she's now being sued over. And Phil Bryant is not a defendant in that suit. And so the Phil Bryant's attorney is coming back and saying, my client's not even a defendant in this suit, and this is a fishing expedition, and this communication is privileged, and the court shouldn't have, or the public shouldn't have, unfettered access to it. And so that'll be up to, it could go a number of different ways. He could have to comply with it completely. It could be dismissed. He could have to comply with it, but the documents be put under a protective order. So there's a few different options, and that will be determined, at a later date. But I don't think we're going to see anything on that, or even necessarily any big developments in the civil case. Of course, something could come up, but I don't think we're going to see anything here in the near future.
Well, I hate for this to make Southern look bad and Favre look. I mean, he's been the hero around this community for years and years, and we've all pulled for him. And I don't know what caused this action here, but I hope it all works out. And not works out, I just hope the guilty are punished. That's all. That's all I want. I want justice. And I think the underserved in this state want justice. If you got these big guys that can take advantage of who's in office and how much money they give them, like I said, how's a governor raise $10 million in Mississippi to run for governor in this state, the poorest state in the union? And it's just not right. There ought to be public funding for elections, for governor, for legislators especially, because they make the laws. That's what we have to live by. And we ought not have to worry about money being the main issue if somebody gets elected. They ought They ought to have public funding for elections, for legislative and governor, and they ought to, and for judges, and for judges. And in fact, I introduced a bill like that where you could take your tax refund and put it to offset elections, and you could do that. But that's something very rarely used. But money is the complete corruption of politics, especially dark money, like it is today. Leto, the Supreme Court judge and U.S. Supreme Court judge, to help get that done where they can use dark money. It's just not right. So let me ask you about another pressing question in the state. I've always been big on healthcare, and especially rural America. And I noticed that you guys had an article last week, I think, or this week. The Mississippi Delta loses its only neonatal care unit. We're losing our burn unit. We're losing, I just understand the Mississippi Delta health system in Greenwood was short $13.2 million in the red. And I understand they're going to have to lay off doctors. Doctors are leaving by the droves because, not that they have that many, they sure don't have too many. And it's just a bad situation. And, and I've been pushing, why won't the governor, Phil Bryant included, when he was there, and the present governor, if you want to call him that, will not expand Medicaid. And it would save these hospitals in areas that's underserved. Have you got any, who wrote that story or who investigated that story for you?
That would be our health team. So Kate Royals and Isabel Taft are heading up that coverage.
Well, I think I'd like to get a hold of them if you would. Do you have any insight into it at all, or?
I mean, I just know that this conversation has been going on for years, and it seems like it's reaching a critical point. But every time I say that, it seems to just keep getting worse. So I don't know if it's a critical point or not at this point.
Well, it depends who you are.
The Medicaid conversation has been going on for, since the ACA was passed, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere closer to a reasonable resolution on it.
And the other party, the Republican Party, they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan for inflation. They don't have a plan for anything. And our parties, the Democratic Party is trying to figure something out. But you got to have a plan. And if you can't see that the state of Mississippi's healthcare situation, we're last in everything, especially obesity, heart disease, blood pressure, you name it, we're there. Why you would not extend that? And I guess I had a friend of mine send me a text. They think it'll cost them votes with their hard right support. And that's no reason not to vote for something that deep down is the right thing to do. So, do you see the investigation going further and further on? I guess there's going to be a stopping point because there's only so many people involved. But do you think they've got everybody that should be involved? Because you're the one that's done the most research on it. You think you can go back to the previous administration, to Bryant, on these Medicaid contracts and stuff like that?
I think that we could find a whole lot more if we looked, going back some years.
Mm-hmm.
But because this didn't just happen overnight. It didn't just start this way, under John Davis. John Davis was there prior to becoming director. And this is just kind of the way that the culture is and was at DHS. I know things have gotten a lot better. They have put in more controls and accountability within subgranting, the contracts that you're talking about within the TANF program. Mm-hmm. But I still think that there is, a lot to work through and a lot to change to make sure that the department is actually serving the people in the best way possible. I think that a lot of people following the story are probably very focused and most concerned with the criminal aspect of it. But that has not been my focus. And I've kind of wanted people to realize that, this story is, if this doesn't lead to conversations about national, policy reform in the social safety net programs, like, I don't know what is. I mean, this happened because the federal government allowed it to happen.
Right.
We did it because we could, and we got away with it for a long time.
Oversight.
And
no oversight.
No oversight. And this is just what has happened. And the only reason that this conversation becomes political, which it's not a political story. I'm not a political reporter.
Yeah.
But because we basically have a one-party state in Mississippi, if it were Democrats who were doing these things, we'd be writing about it in the same exact way.
Absolutely.
But the Republicans happen to be the ones in power, and they happen to be pushing this ideology that, people in poverty just need a pep talk, or, just need to learn some personal responsibility. That's the talking point.
That's kind of like, that sounds like getting pregnant. Just say no.
and that, like, that they won't do right with the money if it's provided directly to them. And, I don't know how you fix that, but, other than just hard evidence, but there's a lot of things that we could be doing besides just putting the money out in cash assistance. We could be supporting evidence-based programs for alleviating poverty, and we're not doing that. And I think that we need to start having a conversation about how we make government work for us. How do we require that subgrantees who are getting money for this very specific purpose of alleviating poverty, how do we require them to prove outcomes and to show that they're doing what they say they're doing?
Well, and I think that's your calling. I think if I read your bio right, you have a deep feeling for corruption in government. Not only corruption, it's just doing the right thing with the money that we get. And healthcare has always been a big thing for me. And, we didn't come up with money. I did, not at Moselle. I don't know anybody had any money in Moselle. There's a few more in Bassville, but not Moselle. We don't even we have one four-way stop. And they might have taken that out. I don't know. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think you and I have the same idea of what needs to happen in the state, and we need to have a balanced government. We need to, it's like even Nancy Pelosi said, as much as the Republicans say, Nancy said, we need two viable parties. You need it where men and women, when they go out and campaign, they actually have to go see people instead of doing the, I'm telling you, my wife and I and our friends, we'd go door to door to door to door, 8 to 10 hours a day. My wife would go 12 hours. She, the best campaigner I ever had, and never will have. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a competitive system where you have to have white and black votes, where you can't, it's my way or the highway, you're not going to win this battle. You got what we got. And we got what we got because people, and I get so, it's just hard for me not just to tell them, are you an idiot? My vote don't count. Well, that attitude has gotten us where it has today. If you don't think your vote don't count, go to Russia or go to China. Get out of here. I get tired of that crap. And it's frustrating to me is you're out here wanting to try to do the best you can do. Then somebody says that, then they get this person like we got right now in charge of the state, and basically all the leadership is one party. So they want to do it. And the problem about no oversight on it, because the Republicans in D.C. will not let it out of the Senate unless you leave it to the state to regulate what they're going to do with the money. And it's just like we got $2 or $3 billion sitting in the highway department, and we can't even get our rails to trails overlaid over here. That's a great thing. It's a quality of life issue for this 3 counties, Forest, Lamar, and Jeff Davis County. I mean, we have visitors all over the country come here, and it's there, and it's used to keep these facilities going, and we need our bridges, and we need water like they have in Jackson. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in Jackson. I guess eventually, do you have any news on the Jackson water issue at all?
I don't really have anything to share. I mean, I just know that, we're kind of put a band-aid on it for now.
But we always
Um,
have. That's the problem.
yeah.
We always have. Well, I'll tell you one thing. They ain't going to put a Band-Aid on this by the time you get through with them. they better figure this out pretty quick. And I hope you are right that we do get oversight over this money, because if it's happening in our state, you can imagine what's happening in these other rural states.
Yeah. Just real quick, I did publish a story yesterday where I talked about that, about what the data shows about how TANF is being operated in other states. And I just want to make the point that, back in 2017, we learned that the Department of Human Services was approving just 1.5% of applicants for cash welfare assistance.
Jeez.
And that was kind of a foreshadowing of what was to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we weren't spending the bulk of the money on direct supports for families, then what were we spending the rest of the money on? And that was the question that I started asking at that time. But I just went through the data for other states, and Mississippi is not alone in that. Texas this year has had an approval rate of TANF applicants of 5%. So just 5% of people applying for cash welfare in Texas this year have been approved. So, and you can go on Mississippi Today and look at the rest of the data. I pulled data going back to 1996,
when
where
did
there
you
were
print that? When did you print?
almost 50,000 families on the program in 1996. There's about 1,600 today.
In Mississippi. Folks, you hear that? From 50,000 to 1,600. Now, let's make one thing clear. We're not saying all 50,000 really deserved it, but are you going to punish everyone for some of the thieves out there that's taking advantage of it, and make the ones that really need it do without? Does that sound right?
I mean, I think that they were finding that there was a fraud rate of somewhere around 1%. At least that's a figure that I've seen in past reports. So, when you say don't deserve, like they're on the program because they qualified for it. There's an eligibility process here, and they were deemed eligible by the department. Now, if there was some fraud that occurred, that's probably a very, very small percentage of the money that went out. And also that has nothing to do with deservingness, right? But I just want to make the point, the people that are on the program are on it because the department found them eligible. And there's a lot more people who deserve, support who are not eligible and do not get the support. So that's the other thing.
Well, and it's hard to control what people buy with the cash, and a lot of people are very critical. They make remarks about, they got candy and they got this.
Yeah, we can be critical about people in poverty buying a bag of chips, but not critical about public officials spending $98 million on pet projects.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Anna. Well, I think we're both would like to see a big change in how this money's handled and the oversight, and more competition in state offices and local offices. It's just hard to have oversight when you have one party with so much power in a state. And that's why these elections in Congress and the legislature are so important, because what we're going through right now is because of a one-party system in this state. And people have got to wake up and vote. Well, Anna, I appreciate it. I know about used you every time I can, and I hate to, I don't want to wear out our welcome, but the next time you get some news. But I would like to talk to the folks. If you will send me their names and so on to me, text it to me, I will give them a call and ask them to come on.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I'll do that.
Okay.
Thanks again for having me on. I'll come on anytime I got something to share.
When you get something new, you let me know, and we appreciate so much you taking your time, and you're doing really a great job, and I can't tell you from a personal point of view, and people I've talked to, how much we appreciate what you've done.
Thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate that.
All right. Take care and be safe out there.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, everybody, you just heard Anna Wolfe, and I think we got a pretty good update of what's going on, what we think is going to happen. We kind of got sidelined on health care, but it is a big issue to me. And to the listeners out there, I will get the reporters who did the stuff on our healthcare system and have them on for these. That hospital in Greenwood is, I don't know how much longer it can last. And a lot of people in Greenwood and that area in the Delta who need that hospital. And who knows? We got a lot of small hospitals around here that are suffering too. So till next week, now we're going to have Mike Landrum, who wrote the book, Evil Lives in Laurel. It's a true story about an undercover FBI guy that got in there as a secretary for the Klan, the White Knights or whatever they want to call themselves. And he kept it a secret for 40 years. And Mike's father, Tom, was the guy. And I never knew it. He was my driver's ed teacher, and nobody ever knew it. He kept it secret for 40 years because he was afraid for his family and his own life. And guys like that, I appreciate. I don't care what party you're from, but it's guys up there that won't stand up and do what's right. And I respect her for that. So for next week, I don't know when we're going to have Mike, but he did promise to be back on. I'm hoping it's before this month's over. I'm going to have some other people on getting out the vote. I mean, I'm going to have a young man from Jackson who graduated from Southern. It's going to be on October the 20th to talk about voting younger people. He's got an organization, Mississippi Move On, I believe. And they're very, very active. They've been in Hattiesburg High. They've been around. They haven't been in Lamar County schools yet. They're asking to come in there. And it's a nonprofit, so they have to register Republican and Democrat. They just want the opportunity to get in there and talk to the kids and tell them how important it is to vote and get them registered. If they want to vote Republican, that's their business. That's their right. Or they want to vote Democrat, that's their right. But we need to get them registered and get them more interested in the future of their own lives in our country. So God bless you. And as a great man said, Vernon Damer, folks, if you don't vote, you don't count. And every time you look in the mirror, you think of how that man was shot and killed in his front yard defending his family, trying to register voters. Take care. And then we're going to have a Y event on the 13th on bugs. Now, what's so important about bugs? West Nile and all these things, and it's kind of going to be a unique event, but it's going to be the 13th at the YMCA. So Sandra Jordan is the one that's heading that up, and she asked me to announce that. I'm more than glad to do that, and I'm going to participate in it. So come on out the 13th at the YMCA and learn more about bugs and watch kids. There's going to be a lot of young people there. So God bless, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Right to Vote Show featuring Congressman Ronnie Shows. The Right to Vote Show airs every Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on WJMG 92.1 FM and WGDQ 93.1 FM. You can also stream The Right to Vote Show at cbsllc.live as well as recapture previous episodes. Once again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Right to Vote Show featuring Congressman Ronnie Shows.